The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Social distancing means people aren't getting together as we normally would. But that doesn't mean we can't connect with friends, and in fact, it may be more important than ever. So tonight, we're exploring why friendship matters now and always. Then Steve talks to historian Patrice Dutil about the remarkable yet underappreciated former Canadian Prime Minister Louie St. Laurent. It's Thursday, December 17th, and that's next on the agenda. We say it all the time, so maybe it's easy not to notice anymore. The heartbreaking idea contained in the phrase is socially distanced. We've been at it now for months, staying apart from friends and acquaintances who would normally be in our daily lives. Has COVID-19 changed the way we do friendship? Has it amplified why we do or don't need a social circle? With us to explore that in Vexin, France, Marta Zaraska, science writer and author of Growing Young, How Friendship, Optimism, and Kindness Can Help You Live to 100. In Dartmouth, Massachusetts, Mazad Hojat, author of The Psychology of Friendship and a professor of psychology at the University of Massachusetts. And here in the provincial capital, Steve Jordan's professor of psychology at the University of Toronto's Scarborough campus. Welcome. Hi to you all.
Hello.
I've been looking forward to this conversation because I think during the pandemic, I leaned so much on my friends. So Marta, I wanted to start with you. How does the relationship between friend and family differ?
I mean, they are both very important for us. So, you need to have both family and friends. To some certain degree, they can be replaceable, you could say. Sounds bad, but science generally shows that, for example, people who don't have siblings, they tend to replace this relationship with having more friends. On the other hand, from health perspective, and this is kind of my angle here, both are important and they add together. So for instance, there was one study done in the Netherlands that showed that whereas, having friends can lower every friend basically in your close network can lower your mortality risk by about 2%. They were very precise about it. The same applies to family members. So each and every person would lower this mortality risk. So the risk of you dying, you could say, early, more and more. And just to put it all into perspective, having a big social network of family and friends can lower your overall mortality risk by about 45%. And this is actually more than even the best diet and exercise, because for diet and exercise, that's 20 to 30%. And there for friends, you had 45%. So this is really, really important for our health and longevity.
Mazad, why is it important for us to make that distinction, the people that we choose to have in our lives versus the people, the families that we're born into?
Well, friendships are voluntary relationships, right? So we choose our friends, but we do not choose our family members. So I think one important thing is that if for whatever reason we are rejected by our family members, it's important to have good friends. Friends could step in and provide the love and the support that we need. So for instance, in case of transgender individuals or gays who may feel rejection by family, it is very important for them to have their friends and their community who help and support them.
So essentially they become a community that they don't have with their family.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it's super important. By the same token, we expect a lot of our family members, right? For instance, our parents, we expect this unconditional love. So when we do get rejected, it is perceived as much more severe. Mm-hmm. And forgiving that is much more difficult.
I don't know if you're familiar with this, but the rapper Drake has this saying, no new friends. But Steve, what roles do friends play in our mental and emotional developments?
It's so critical, and it probably is why it attaches to longevity the way it does. When you think of just the animal kingdom, there is no animal in the animal kingdom that needs social connections, as quickly as we do, right from the moment of birth. If we don't have that other person taking care of us, that's it. And, depending on your family, what is it, 20 years, 30 years before they can finally get out of the house. And that's, really is at the heart of us as human beings, that anytime we feel a negative emotion, stress, grief, anxiety, it's our social connections and our really close social connections that allow us to kind of dissipate that anxiety. We feel that other people are there and that they care, and that kind of makes it bearable a lot. And those are the people we reach out to. And so as we're kind of moving from being a child where our parents are it to a more independent state, then our friends become that sort of next group that we can lean on that way anytime things are difficult, like, for example, maybe during a pandemic.
Exactly. And Marta, your research tells us that being in a romantic relationship is good for us. Two questions. Why is that? And in what ways do we benefit from being in a romantic relationship?
I mean, so just like Steve said before, we evolved this way. We are social apes. We function the best, our bodies function the best when we are surrounded by others in whom we can trust, on whom we can rely on. And this is when our stress response, so our fight or flight response, calms down, and we, with all the downstream consequences for hormones such as cortisol, adrenaline, that can have negative impact on our body if we are chronically stressed. So marriage is one relationship like this, or committed relationship, romantic relationship, because it calms our stress. We feel that there is another person on whom we can rely, and this is why committed is really important here. Generally, in research, when the relationship is not committed, even if it's long term, if it's not committed, it doesn't have the same effects on health. And in truth, if you were to do just one single thing for your health longevity, having a happy, committed, romantic relationship, that would be it. Because people who are in this kind of relationships, they have lower risk of diabetes, lower risk of heart disease, of cancer, even of flu. They respond better to viruses. So it's really, really important for us.
Is it different for men and women?
Actually, it is. And bizarrely, research tends to find that actually, whereas for women, the romantic relationship has to be happy, it has to be of high quality, for men, it's not necessarily so. They actually profit in terms of health and longevity, even from a not very good marriage. And it may seem very bizarre at first, but it probably is due to the fact that women tend to be more of organizers of social lives, which takes us back to friendship, right? They tend to connect the family more, with friends, connect with community, with neighbors, with family as well. And men, even in a not very good relationship, can actually profit from this friendship making that's the partner can provide. And this is probably why they may even benefit in terms of health, even from a not very good relationship.
During the pandemic, if you live with somebody, I think if you have a roommate, I think that roommate might be closer to you than any family member or any of your friends. So is there any benefit to that, Marta?
I mean, certainly, as I mentioned before, every single relationship you have, adds close relationship. We're not talking about, just some passersby or Facebook friends. Mm-hmm. Your real close friendship, each and every can calm down the stress response. It can also boost your social hormones. So, when you are sharing your personal space with another person, when you're touching, hugging, you're making eye contact, you get release of social hormones such as oxytocin, serotonin, vasopressin, endorphins. It all has cumulative effect on your health and on your mental well-being as well.
Steve, I see you nodding.
Yeah, I mean, those social hormones really do build that trust relationship where we really start to feel, that person really cares for us. And that's I sometimes in the pandemic, I recommend things like do karaoke with your family or with whoever's around with you. Because when you do karaoke, you'll sing, you'll laugh, and that releases these hormones that Marta is talking about. And that really does form that stronger bond between you and that person, which is a bond you can then rely on at times when you need a shoulder to cry on, as we say.
Mazad, at what age do we make those foundational friendships?
Well, friendships begin very early on, but they gain importance as we become less attached to our parents and start to give more importance to our peers. So initially, children play side by side with other children. Eventually, they have a very good friend, then it becomes a very best friend. And then, of course, during teenage years, friendships become super important. And that's when young people confide in their good friends and talk about issues that they may not feel comfortable discussing with their family members.
And Marta, when you're a kid, I think the only requirement for friendship, it could just be like the other person is a child and they're physically there. Why do we lose this ability to easily pick up friends as we get older?
I mean, I would argue that's the problem with time. We just don't put the same kind of effort into our relationships, especially our friendships anymore, the way children do. But, and the truth is that very often friendships are formed just by chance. For instance, there was one fascinating study of police workers, and it showed that the police women and men are mostly friends with people whose last names are very close in alphabet to their own. And it seemed bizarre at first until they discovered, it was all due to alphabetized sitting in police academy. So people basically, with your last name starts with W, will make friends with other people whose last name starts with W. And the same happens in student housing and so on. So we can see that, friendships needs proximity, basically, geographical proximity. You have to be together in the same place. You have to share things that happen to you. You have to share time. And if we don't put this kind of effort, and we are busy as adults, right? So we are working, we are having families. So it's much harder to find the same time to put into relationships.
And Mazad, does it have to do, because my son is very shy, and I always get a little protective of him when people are trying to make him make friends. When it comes to our ability to make friends, does it depend on how extroverted or introverted you are?
Yes, absolutely. So extroverted individuals are, they have an easier time talking to others, but I think a lot of friendships are based on similar interests and hobbies. So we tend to, as was mentioned by your other guest, become friends with people who are physically close to us. So we work with those individuals, our classmates, our neighbors. So whoever we spend more time with, we tend to become friends with. And this is an opportunity to explore our similar interests, right? And then it becomes more of a rewarding experience because you realize that, oh, I also like horror movies. So let's take time and go watch a movie together. You don't have to fight over, why my interest is better than yours. So similar interests are super important to friendships.
And does it matter the quantity of friends that you have, or is it about quality?
Well, I think it's definitely about the quality of friendships. Now, one interesting thing is that changes as we get older. So young individuals, like in college, have a lot more friends. And as we get older, we tend to hang out more with fewer people, but the quality improves. And especially individuals in older age tend to have fewer friends, but those are friends that they care about more, and the quality of relationship is much higher.
And research has shown, I guess, how many friends we have in our life. Marta, what is the Dunbar number?
So Dunbar number, generally considered to be 150. And this is what Professor Robin Dunbar, who I actually met when I was researching Growing Young at the University of Oxford. And this is a number that he calculated that is of number of friends that our brains basically can support. So he compared the size of neocortex in different primate species with the number of friends they have and calculated basically how many our brains can support as well. And it was about 150, which also happens to be generally the size of different communities through human history. And what he also talks about is different types of friendship circles. So the closest circle would be 1 to 3 friends, which are your kind of closest BFFs kind of thing. Then you have about up to 7 so-called shoulders to cry on. So people maybe not your best friends of all times, but still people with whom you share secrets, your emotions, and so on. And then you have the wider circles, up to 150 people with whom you can have a meaningful relationship, right? Because of course you can have 3,000 people, friends on Facebook, but these are not really meaningful relationships. That's, according to Professor Dunbar, up to 150 people.
That sounds like a big number, though, 150, isn't it?
I mean, if you count all your, work colleagues, because it doesn't have to be like, super close friend, but, these are people who's more or less, what's going on in their lives, right? These are your neighbors or your cousins and aunts and uncles and exactly coworkers. So basically everybody whom you have some kind of idea what's happening in their lives.
The irony is that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and this is when we would rely on our friends and acquaintances to support us. Steve, how has the pandemic affected our friendships?
Yeah, and the answer to that, kind of related to what you're talking about, depends a little bit on your age to some extent as well. One way to think about this is in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where he talks about you're needing to fulfill certain needs, and then you move up a chain. So first of all is your sort of basic biological needs to have enough food and water. If those are met, then you worry about your security needs, feeling safe and secure. But above that is your social needs, and that's where most young people are. They're trying to build out that social network we're talking about, so they ultimately have that group of really close friends that they can rely on all their life. But it's that period of time when they are meeting new people at things like parties. They go with the friends they have, and then they meet these new strangers who could become their next friends. And then at some point they settle down. And Maslow would say they are then worried more about how people think of them in terms of, am I a good father? Am I a good parent? Am I a good worker? And so that's what we call our esteem needs. And suddenly we stop worrying so much about social interactions. And so now we have a pandemic that comes and says, you cannot be physically close to other people. For those of us who are very career-oriented, that's not such a terrible thing. We have our social network built out. It's still difficult, but for a lot of these young people that we saw slipping and having parties and doing things, it wasn't totally surprising, because they are at a stage in their life where the primary thing they are sort of driven towards is building out this social network they're going to rely on for the rest of their life. So for that group especially, this has been an extremely challenging time.
There's been a lot of tisk-tisking for that group, saying you should stay home, you should do the right thing. And I want to ask Mazda and Marta that same question. How has the pandemic affected our friendships? Mazda, I would like to start with you.
Sure. Yeah, I see a lot with my students. I think that maybe all of us are mildly depressed because of the COVID pandemic, but especially young people. So what I find is that there's this, mild depression. Our students are worried about, spending time with friends, and there's a lot of disagreement and discord between friends, because some want to hang out and some don't. So it's been very hard, I think, for young people. And but the most important thing, I think, is first of all the family support, because a lot of them, if they live with parents, and they have at least some support, and also the ability to still connect with friends through Zoom, through Skype, Google Hangout, and so on, to maintain their friendship. So that's super important. And also not to judge our friends. Everybody has a different situation. We don't know what's happening. Maybe some people have parents who are sick or have conditions that could be especially dangerous in terms of being susceptible to COVID. So I think that we all need to just relax and stay away from each other physically, but socially still connect.
And just to pick up of what Mazad just said about this judgment around what people are doing right and wrong, especially when it comes to young people. Marta, how do you think the pandemic has affected our friendships?
I mean, definitely it's been very hard on all of us. You know, I'm actually extremely grateful that here in France, my daughter, who is 8 years old, was able to go to school for most of the time. You know, the schools have been only closed for 5 weeks, so she was able to be with her friends and not really lose these connections, because I also think that for young children it is extremely important to be, you know, physically with their friends. She was trying to do all this Zoom and online, it was just not working. And you know, we are once again social creatures who need the physical connection, and we just don't get the same benefits, mental and physical, from connecting over Zoom or Skype and so on. There is even research showing that when you are texting versus calling, so hearing someone else's words over the phone, you get less of oxytocin boost. So this so-called love hormone that makes you feel all warm and fuzzy and loved, and also has, you know, downstream physical consequences for your body. For example, can lower your inflammation levels. It can lower your pain perception. It can even boost bone growth, you know, potentially preventing osteoporosis. And you get less of this oxytocin when you're text messaging people instead of calling them, hearing their voice. And most likely, you know, there is no research really yet on Zoom and stuff like this. I'm guessing it's coming, but when you see people, you get even more of that. So it's really also important to choose well how we are connecting, and exactly text messaging really should be at the bottom of our lists.
We should be picking up the phone to call.
Yes, and even better, you know, Zoom, Skype, the more you can get, you know, visual and generally input, the better, because, you know, our brains need all this kind of information from the other person. We need to look into the other person's eyes. We need to, you know, see their movements. You know, we mimic other people's movements to become closer to them as well, right? Mm-hmm. We place our hands, our legs, depending how the other person places them. It's really all important, this kind of non-verbal messaging. And if you are just texting, the information is so limited.
As a parent, it's been one of those things where I'm relying so much on screens. Before it was like no screens. Now it's like everything is on a screen. And Steve, when we talk about friendships right now, the only way that we can really maintain these friendships is online. And then there's the other side of social media friendships. So are social media friendships as helpful to your mental health as other types of friendships?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely not. And it's very important to kind of bring together some of these things and realize that in friendships, we're learning critical skills, skills that are going to make us successful all our life. That dance that we've been talking about between the nonverbal and the verbal, let me just give one example to try to make that really clear to people. I've been really espousing the phone lately, and, you know, use the phone, pick up the phone, and there's two reasons for that. One is we attend to people when we're on the phone with them. We actually pay attention to what they're saying, as opposed to online when, you know, everybody seems to be half attending to us. And the impact of that is that our nonverbals align, and that's the dance that we're learning. So just to give a concrete example, you know, I could be on the phone and I could be telling somebody I was on the waterfront with my wife, and there were a bunch of people who came right at us, walked right towards us, didn't try to avoid us. And if the person I'm talking to simply does this, you know, this weird little sound, but at the right time, what they're telling us is, I've been there. Oh, that's annoying. I can feel your frustration, man. And so that tells us, first, they're listening. Second, that they are with us, that they are sharing that emotional state, that empathy connection. And we have to learn that dance. We have to learn to do that with others. So for example, a critical component skill of any friendship, perhaps the critical skill, is something we call active listening. Being able to shut up and let the other person tell us about their perception of something, and then kind of mining that, spending some time trying to understand, you know, how that other person thinks about something. It is amazing. Like, if you have anybody in your life right now who's feeling a lot of anxiety, and especially if this ever boils up into sort of an argument, because we are all sort of fight or flight, the best thing you can do is shut up and say, hey, listen, I can understand you're upset. Let's talk about why you're upset. Can you explain it to me? Can you make me understand? And if you can do that authentically, you will see the anger drop, and you will enter a situation where you can have a rational, connecting conversation. And those are the skills children are learning in friendship. They're the skills that are going to serve them well when they're being interviewed for that job they really, really want. And so that's why it's so important that they're out there doing that they're getting that practice, and because it will serve them all through their lives.
I think we've touched on it a little bit, the differences between men and women. Marta, what role does gender play in the types of friendships we have?
I mean, so definitely female and male friendships do differ. And in general, scientists say that whereas women have friendships that are face-to-face, men have friendships that are side-by-side. And what they mean by that is that face-to-face is because it's based on emotion, right? So women share their secrets, their emotions, they complain, they share their happy moments, and so on and so on. So it's emotion-based. Whereas for men, it's more side-by-side because they do stuff together. They go fishing, they go playing, I don't know, poker or whatever. They do stuff side by side. So definitely the type of friendship men and women do does differ a lot. And but we all need friends, whether we are women or men. And also we all can improve on the kind of friends we are. For example, empathy, which is an extremely important thing for all relationships, be it marriage or friendship, is something that even though women tend to have more empathy, biologically, because empathy is dependent on testosterone during pregnancy, for instance. So women tend to be more empathetic, but it is something that we can actually train. So we can improve on our empathy by basically trying to see the world from another person's perspective. Even by reading books or watching emotional movies, you can also boost your empathy. And this is something that's really vital for any friendship, whether you are male or female.
And Mazad, why does it seem that men's friendships with other men are perhaps less intimate than women's friendships with each other?
I think that cultural norms are to blame, but frankly, in Western cultures, it is not acceptable for men to become very intimate with their male friends and to express emotions, especially negative emotions. Like fear and the interesting thing is that when we go to other cultures, in Eastern cultures, for instance, in the Middle East, we don't see that. We see that men are able to express their emotions more freely and friendships are more intimate. So I think that it has a lot to do with the way we construe what is it like, what is appropriate for a male friendship or a female friendship. And I think that does injustice to men, because to be able to express your emotions when you are upset, you're angry, you're afraid, we all have emotions and we all need to express them. So hopefully, it will change, but I think that that is still the case right now.
We're at a time of year where normally suicides are on the rise during the holiday season, and we know that men have a suicide rate 3 times higher than women. During the pandemic, Steve, this creates so many, it creates another layer that we have to address, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it is always difficult, and it is always difficult this time of year with seasonal affective disorder and things like that going on as well. And the pandemic certainly, adds that economic uncertainty. There are people who don't have jobs potentially. I think a really important thing for everybody to realize is that we are in a temporary situation, that there is every reason to believe that, as a year from now, certainly, if not much sooner than that, we will have what I've been terming the great snapback because of all these social needs that humans have. I firmly predict that we will see people, as soon as it's safe, go back to that very social way of being. And so it's really a question of kind of getting from here to there. And the good news is that most of us understand that this uncertainty that we're feeling is not our cause. So often depression is caused by a feeling like somebody has tried to make things better and they keep running into barriers and it never works. And so they fall into this so-called learned helplessness. But in this case, it's not our fault. If you don't have a job, it's not your fault. It's this virus, and this virus is a temporary thing. And so I think hopefully with governmental support, so that people feel like they're able to kind of stay afloat through these times, I'm hoping we don't see a big surge in suicide or depression in general. I mean, there's as we've suggested, there's this underlying depression and underlying anxiety that I think we're all kind of wrestling with through here. But the hope is that the conditions aren't really those that will really produce, a ton of depression, and that once we get through it with the hope that waits, things will be okay. But it's still going to be a tough winter for sure for many people.
So Mazad, how do we move forward? How do we create an environment where we can have these open conversations about these topics?
Honestly, pick up the phone, call your friends, talk to them, find out how they're doing, and ask them. I think that the more conversation that exists around this topic and the more education about that topic, and the more it becomes less of a taboo. So we are all human beings, we are all social animals, we need each other, and we sometimes feel down. And this is one of the times when the entire world is down, So I think that it's super important to reach out to that friend, pick up the phone, and reach out and say, I just wanted to see how you're doing. And the one important thing that I should mention is that sometimes you don't hear from your friends, and you may think that, they don't want to talk to me, for whatever reason. Perhaps it's because they are depressed, they are having problems. So you should make the first step. Pick up the phone, contact them, and find out what your friends are doing.
Steve, did you want to jump in?
I was just going to mention, to take that a step further, we counted on our random interactions in our day to give us that sort of friendship connection, and we're not getting that. And so we should consider scheduling things, literally having times during our day when we do reach out and connect. And with respect to the male-female distinction, I'd want to highlight again that those nonverbals communicate a whole lot of emotion. And so it may be the case that men are not verbally sharing emotions in the actual words that they're saying. But when a male connects with another male and they have discussions, they are still non-verbally communicating that, hey, I'm there for you, buddy. If you need me, and that's what we need. We need to know that that person is there and they care. And I think men and women may communicate that differently to one another, and culture is probably an impact on that as described. But I think it's happening in both cases. It's just probably a little more nonverbal. It still is needed. And so men should be reaching out to their male friends and just finding excuses to talk about, watch some movie, agree to watch some movie together, and then say, we'll call each other and just talk about it. And it's less about the words, more about that nonverbal interaction, that dance that's happening.
And Marta, I'll give you 30 seconds. I think this could be a great opportunity to make friendships even stronger. What should we be doing during the pandemic to help our friendships survive the pandemic?
I mean, I totally agree with Steve that, scheduling time for friendship is absolutely vital. We put so much effort into finding the best diets, into, exercise regimes and all this kind of stuff for our health and mental well-being as well. Whereas we don't put the same effort on friendship, even though friendship is at least as important for us as diet and exercise. So we really, really should make sure that we put it into our calendar, pick the phone, call your friends at least once a week. That's an absolute minimum generally in research. But in general, I'm quite optimistic. When we look back at the Spanish flu pandemic, people were also told to socially distance, not to hug, not to shake hands. They wore masks, and yet it didn't ruin our friendships. People bounced back. We are still hugging. We were hugging before the coronavirus pandemic, so we didn't stop hugging, shaking hands, and so on. So I'm also very optimistic that we'll bounce back very fast, and even perhaps we'll emerge stronger, because if we now realize how much we need these connections, how much we are missing our friends, even our work colleagues, the water cooler moments at work, people are really realizing how important that is for them. So maybe this knowledge will push us to invest more in our friendships, in our relationships afterwards, with all the benefits for our mental health and for our physical health as well.
And not take anything for granted. I will never complain about commuting ever again. Thank you so much for all of your insight. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
We've had 23 prime ministers in Canada since 1867, not all of them significant, but of those that were, one in particular has been overlooked throughout history. Strange, too, considering Louis Saint Laurent won the biggest majority government ever for the Liberals. He got the St. Lawrence Seaway and Trans-Canada Highway built, created the RRSP, and stayed prime minister until he was 75 years old. Patrice Dutil has tried to remedy that oversight with The Unexpected Louis Saint Laurent, Politics and Policies for a Modern Canada, and the Ryerson University professor in the Department of Politics and Public Administration joins us now from North Toronto. Mon ami, comment allez-vous ce soir?
Thank you very much for having me, Steve. Always nice to be back at Ontario's kitchen table.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. I'm going to start with the assumption that because he's been out of the public eye for so long, not that many people know who Louis Saint Laurent is. So, Sheldon, if you would, let's bring this graphic up and we'll just go through some of the red letter dates of his life. Starting in 1941, when he was asked by Prime Minister William Lyon Mackenzie King to join the cabinet as the Minister of Justice. In 1945, he becomes Canada's External Affairs Minister. And 3 years later, he succeeds Mackenzie King as leader of the Liberal Party and the 12th Prime Minister of Canada. He is 66 years old. He is the oldest person ever to become Prime Minister. In 1949, he won the biggest election victory in the Liberal Party's history, 190 seats. However, in 1957, he is defeated by John Diefenbaker, despite winning 200,000 more votes than Diefenbaker. And in 1973, he dies at the age of 91, and he's buried in his hometown of Compton, Quebec. And here now is some very old footage of Louis Saint Laurent becoming Prime Minister.
News from Canada centres on the change in premiership. The new Prime Minister, Mr. Louis Saint Laurent, with the Governor-General, Lord Alexander, and the retiring Premier, Mr. Mackenzie King, is seen at Government House, Ottawa, with members of the Cabinet just after the swearing-in ceremony. Later, Mr. Saint Laurent took the opportunity of broadcasting to the people of the Dominion.
I've just returned from Government House, where in the presence of my colleagues, His Excellency the Governor-General announced my appointment as Prime Minister and as President of His Majesty's Privy Council for Canada.
There we go, all the way back in 1948. Okay, Patrice, tell us this. Mackenzie King asked him to join the cabinet in November 1941. That began his political career, but he wasn't even an MP at the time. So my question is, did Saint Laurent actually want to get into politics?
No, it was the last thing he ever wanted. Louis Saint Laurent was about to turn 60, and when Mackenzie King approached him because his leading minister, Ernest Lapointe, had died in November, Louis Saint Laurent said, look, I'm an old man. He was just about to turn 60, and in those days, turning 60 was quite a milestone. I'm not ready for this. His wife, Jeanne Renaud, was certainly not interested in that kind of thing, and he resisted. He resisted until Pearl Harbor, Steve. When Pearl Harbor hit, he heard the news that Sunday night. The people, the family was at the dining room table in Quebec City, and that made up his mind. He said, I have to get involved. There has to be a response. And he finally made up his mind. He contacted Mackenzie King that Monday, and on Tuesday morning, he was sworn in. So he hesitated a long time, but it was Pearl Harbor that made the difference.
Do you think it was the fact that he was a Navy man in the past and that basically spoke to his sense of duty and mission?
I think that Louis Saint Laurent had very much an innate sense of duty. His daughter was enrolled, his son was involved in the war effort. He couldn't say no anymore, and the need was pressing. He had a sense of Canada. He had a sense of duty all through his life. He lent his name to all sorts of good causes, and I think that's what, at the end of the day, swept him into cabinet.
Now, the title of your book is The Unexpected Louis Saint Laurent. What was unexpected about him?
Well, I write unexpected because so far historians and political scientists have not given him a whole lot of effort, a lot of treatment. He shows up here and there in various specialized studies, people think of Louis Saint Laurent as either a lucky guy who happened to be prime minister when things were running fairly well, or as a a Jerzy Kaczynski kind of character, Chauncey Gardner, who's just there, just being there. And I think that the perception has to change. That Louis Saint Laurent was not some benign figure. He was actually a policy entrepreneur. He was a man of a certain sense of Canada, and he brought enormous reforms to the country. That's why I subtitled the book, Modern Policies for a Modern Canada.
Well, when Mackenzie King stepped down in 1948 after serving, I think, the longest tenure of any prime minister in the British Commonwealth, or Empire as it then was Saint Laurent the obvious successor to Mackenzie King at the time?
Oh, a lot of people wanted the job, and there was a leadership convention, and people ran for it. Louis Saint Laurent was Mackenzie King's favorite. Mackenzie King really saw himself as the meat in a liberal sandwich. He had succeeded to Wilfrid Laurier, and he wanted a francophone successor. Mackenzie King was also quite concerned that the country was still fragile. The Second World War was searing, not as bad as the First World War, but he was really quite concerned about national unity. And Louis Saint Laurent was a guy who attracted respect and attracted affection. So for Mackenzie King, Louis Saint Laurent was the right guy. And when Mackenzie King sort of leaned on the caucus and leaned on the membership, this is my anointed one. I mean, the other contenders had no chance.
Well, you say affection, and maybe that answers my next question, which is going to be, why was his nickname Uncle Louie?
Well, right in his first campaign as leader in 1948, he attracted children. He's a man who was very happy with children. He was a shy man, and yet somehow found expression for all his emotions when he was surrounded by children. He loved children, and it just so happened that in some of his campaign stops early on in the campaign of 1948, there were all these gatherings of children, and he just cottoned to them. The journalists immediately nicknamed him Uncle Louie, and it stuck. He had this avuncular quality. He was the grandfather to the nation, a rather unique man. I mean, we never had, as you said earlier, such an old man assuming the prime ministership, and people were looking for that kind of comfort. It wasn't just Canada. The United States, have Harry Truman, then Dwight Eisenhower. The leaders in Great Britain are all elderly. I mean, Winston Churchill in the 1950s comes back to the prime ministership in Britain. There's something about the early 1950s, the Cold War. People are looking for assurance, and Uncle Louie seems to bring the right blend.
Now, having said that, one of the contributors to your book, the U of T historian Robert Bothwell, said Louis Saint Laurent had the best characteristics of a prime minister, but few of the best attributes of a politician. What did he mean by that?
Yes. I think Bothwell is quite accurate on that front. Louis Saint Laurent saw himself as a Canadian. He was a liberal. He'd always been a liberal, but he was a man who put the affairs of state first. He wasn't really a great liberal in the sense that he wasn't worried about party affairs so much. He left that to people who were specialized in that area. For him, it was about national unity. It was about some of his great priorities, like bringing in Newfoundland into Confederation, fighting the good war on the Cold War, working with the bureaucracy to create innovative new programs. That was his focus, and he said when in his one interview he did after he was defeated, he said, what he liked about government was doing interesting things and having the chance to do more interesting things. That's what I think Robert Bothwell really means by all this.
We will, of course, cover off some of his achievements, but I do want to speak a bit about the darker side of his political career as well, because he was a virulent anti-communist. He even forbade the great singer and political activist Paul Robeson from coming into Canada. The current Prime Minister of Canada said he was purposefully neglectful of Indigenous people and viewed them as inferior. Are these fair criticisms of Louis Saint Laurent?
No, I vehemently disagree with that assessment. I think that the record shows that Louis Saint Laurent cared deeply about the indigenous people. He moved policies to really improve the funding of schools, working with local school boards to look after children. There's a real assessment in the Saint Laurent years about the harm of residential schools. This is the period when people are really starting to recognize this is not working well at all. And then where I have perhaps more issue, and I have a wonderful colleague in the book, Whitney Lackenbauer, who writes about this. The treatment of the Inuit had flaws. Undoubtedly, there was something missing there. But it nevertheless was important that the government of Canada reacted to the plight of the Inuit in their struggle against tuberculosis. They brought the Inuit south and the Inuk south for treatment. And this is where the big mistake happened. That out of cruelty, out of prejudice, out of a whole variety of reasons, people forgot in some cases to inform the families in the Arctic that their family members had died. And that's sad. It is profoundly sad, and it's inexcusable. But it has to be put into the context of a government that is at least recognizing that there is a problem and doing something about it. He had great people around him at the cabinet table. Jean Lesage, who became the premier of Quebec, oversaw the process. Top bureaucrats were looking after the Inuit. I mean, there's a great effort being made there, and I think it's really unfair to tag Louis Saint Laurent with being cruel in the manner that the current prime minister has labeled him.
Well, okay, but I'm going to come back at you again, because during World War II, he was the Minister of Justice when this country put Japanese Canadians and Italian Canadians who did nothing wrong other than, have family members or, originate in countries that we were at war with, and they ended up interned in this country. How much responsibility does he have to bear for that?
Of course he has responsibility, and he accepted the responsibility. This is not something he was proud of. It's not something he was happy about, but he did it and he acknowledged it. It's important, again, to remember the context. People were very much afraid that the Japanese community would somehow ally with Imperial Japan and undermine Canada's war effort. As I said earlier, he joined the government because of Pearl Harbor. There were mistakes made. He recognized it, and he said we still did the right thing. Now, as you know, there is right now a debate among historians about the nature of the Japanese government's perceptions on Canada. There is evidence that the Japanese had designs on Canada, and Louis Saint Laurent, as I say, accepted responsibility, but I don't think he would have changed anything. And again, that is a mark against him. That is to be expected, and it's fair game.
All right. On the other hand, as we suggested in the introduction, the St. Lawrence Seaway, Trans-Canada Highway, the RSP, these are things that clearly have stood the test of time. How significant would you place them on the list of prime ministerial achievements over the years? Well,
very, very high. Steve, one of the great realizations to this project was the long list of things that he gave Canada, he and his team, and I emphasize that. Again, Newfoundland joining, equalization, a universal pension at age 65, universal pension at age 70, but you could get one at age 65 if you had the need. He Canadianized the Governor General. He managed to build all the infrastructure. He fought, he built up the military. He created an aerospace industry in Canada. It was under his government that the decision was made to support the Avro Aero, Canada's fighter jet. Again, we know it didn't work very well, and the project was canned with good reasons. But all the same, the effort was there to support Canada, to support the ambition that Canada could play a role in aerospace. That's no small thing. There's countless evidence of the modern approach that Louis Saint Laurent adopted for his country. The creation of the Canada Councils, another example. There's a long list of things that he brought about. And today, the equalization formula is in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The RSPs is an instrument that has improved the middle class of this country, and we owe that to him and his administration.
Well, I'll give you another one you didn't mention here, and that is, believe it or not, we were an independent country at the time, but believe it or not, if you got a lower court decision that you didn't like, and you didn't like how the Supreme Court, interpreted it, you were allowed to go to the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council in the United Kingdom and appeal those decisions. What did he do about that?
Enough of that, he said.
Yeah.
This is about Canadianizing our institutions. We are going to make our Supreme Court the last court of appeal. The decisions will be made by Canadians for Canadians. The Governor General will be a Canadian. All sorts of honors will be Canadianized. We have a wonderful chapter by my friend Christopher McCreary on this. It is really about reimagining the Canadian identity. And it really creates a path for successor governments to move along. He will not create a new flag. He has a feeling that this needs to happen. It'll take another decade. But really, the giant strides made to Canadianize symbols is very important.
Patrice, shall we talk pipelines?
Yeah, why not?
We know a little something about...
Seems to be a recurring topic.
I was just going to say, we know a little something about pipelines here, given Keystone XL and Northern Gateway and Line 9 and all of that. But you know what? You can put all of those together, and they would still not amount to the controversy that the pipeline during Louis Saint Laurent's time represented. Tell us that story and the significance of it.
Well, Louis Saint Laurent and his government wanted gas pipelines to run from Alberta straight to Ontario and Quebec. That was the intention. We had a reliable supply of natural gas, and Eastern Canada needed it. So how do we go about this? And Louis Saint Laurent and his minister, his famous minister, C.D. Howe, put together a program. It would be borrowing money from the United States, using American contractors, a whole variety of factors to get the thing built. A lot of people, and John Diefenbaker, number one, really call this strategy into question. They question American involvement. They question the handling of the pipeline decision. The Liberals cut off debate. That's the worst of all crimes. And in 1957, the Conservatives really make a fuss out of this. It taps into the dissatisfaction of many Canadians, and ultimately, as you said at the outset, it will cause the government to be defeated. Louis Saint Laurent won, and the Liberals won the popular vote, but the government lost many ministers, including C.D. Howe. So the punishment was harsh. That being said, it was visionary, and there was no hesitation in doing what was necessary to ensure that Easterners had access to natural gas to heat their homes.
Just to show you what a different time it was, though, I've often talked to John Turner, the former Prime Minister, about this, where people crammed the galleries on Parliament Hill to watch those debates as they went on, because it was so important and so crucial to the future of the country. Boy, have times changed, eh?
Oh, very much. And, everything was at stake here. And the government, I thought the government defended itself very well, but it was not sufficient. You had to deal with the Diefenbaker factor, and Diefenbaker was really an adversary who was young and, younger, vigorous, while Mr. Saint Laurent was becoming a little bit more tired, a little less vigorous. There was also a bit of a backlash against the Suez crisis. We forget, Prime Minister Saint Laurent supported Lester Pearson adamantly in those years to mobilize Canada and to mobilize allies around Canada's idea of a United Nations force, peacekeeping force in the Suez. A lot of Canadians did not like that. Saint Laurent dismissed the great men of Europe who tried to reestablish colonialism. He was very much in support of the new nations, of the decolonized nations. We forget that Louis Saint Laurent invented overseas assistance. He participated in the Colombo Plan. In 1953, he encouraged the creation of international development money. That's another one of his contributions. He was very much at ease among world leaders, and that's an important factor. So I mean, I've diverged a little bit from pipelines, but it just goes to show that the 1957 victory by Diefenbaker was in part pipelines, but also in part a resistance to what Canada had done over Suez.
Well, that leads nicely to my last question here. And I want to read a quote here from Bruce Hutchison, who was a big-name journalist back in the day, who wrote, "No finer human being ever governed Canada, and none has been so thoroughly misunderstood as Louis Saint Laurent." Why misunderstood, Patrice?
I think that it's a unique experience. Saint Laurent really disappeared. After he was defeated in 1957, he completely left the limelight. Diefenbaker's personality takes over politics, Pearson, and then Trudeau. He's completely forgotten. And when Hutchison's writing this, it's really a reflection of the fact that, my goodness, so much had been accomplished in those years of 49. This was an era when people felt good about their government. They felt confident that the government was going to do well, that the government was going to look after the majority of people. And with those years, in the years after that, that sentiment starts to fall apart and people have less trust in government. So looking back, Hutchinson says, you know, that was a golden period, and Louis Saint Laurent really was at the root of it, and we've forgotten about that. Louis Saint Laurent was a modest man. He never claimed the limelight. He was a shy man, and he didn't really care about his reputation. He'd done the best he could, and was quite happy in leaving the stage to others.
For a shy, unassuming man, you've got 4 very interesting faces of of Louis Saint Laurent on the cover of your book. If people like Canadian political history, they got to get a hold of this. The Unexpected Louis Saint Laurent, edited by our guest Patrice Dutil. Merci beaucoup, mon ami. À la prochaine fois, d'accord?
Always nice to be with you. Thank you very much, Steve. Merci.
That is the agenda for Thursday, December 17th, 2020. Not everyone is a fan of the holidays. Tomorrow, we'll get into that. Also, we'll hear from sports writer Doug Smith on his new book that looks back over the first 25 years of the Toronto Raptors. I'm Nam Kiwanuka. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.